November 16, 1992 Observer Newsletter, Jake checks into rehab, THESZ makes challenge, some history. By Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. November 16, 1992. Jake Roberts checked himself into the Betty Ford Rehab Center this past November 16, 1992 Observer Newsletter, Jake checks into rehab, THESZ makes challenge, some history. By Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. November 16, 1992. Jake Roberts checked himself into the Betty Ford Rehab Center this past Tuesday, and his future with World Championship Wrestling appears bleak. The 37-year-old Roberts, real name Aurelian Smith Jr., son of Jake Grizzly Smith, one of WCW's road agents, had been pushed as the promotion's top heel since arriving on August 2. Roberts missed all subsequent matches after doing color commentary on the TBS Saturday show that was taped on November 2 and aired on November 7. It is believed Roberts' actions came because of non-wrestling related personal pressures. Apparently WCW is going to take the missed dates as a contract violation because Watts has said Roberts has been fired and that he would be making an announcing at the television tapings on Wednesday night at Center Stage, set for Saturday air date, of that fact. The WCW wrestlers were under the impression after Roberts checked himself that he wouldn't be returning to the company at any time soon. Signs were posted at the arenas saying that because of circumstances beyond the control of WCW, that Jake Roberts wouldn't be appearing on the shows, and an announcement was made at the beginning of the house shows. The Sunday WCW main event voiceovers were taped after Roberts had checked himself in, and there was no mention of Roberts during that show. Word was given not to mention his name from this point forward, which seems to indicate his chances of being brought back aren't particularly high. Roberts is scheduled to remain in rehab through about November 23, at which point it is uncertain what direction his wrestling career will take. Roberts had been through rehab at least once while in the WWF, and had been suspended for failing drug tests during his WWF tenure on at least 2 occasions. One of the stranger stories of the past year unfolded and will now seemingly disappear after events that took place on Friday. As mentioned last week, a great deal of press and speculation was generated when THESZ issued a challenge on behalf of Nobuhiko Takada for a proposed NWA/U.W.F.I. World Title Unification match with Masa Chono. It was pretty well known that New Japan knew nothing of the UWFI idea beforehand. UWFI attempted a grandstand play to try and give the impression to the fans that Chono, the NWA champ, was afraid of Takada. This, in theory, would make Takada in the fans' eyes a more serious world champ. The idea stemmed in part from statements in Mark magazines where THESZ, upon awarding his so-called original world heavyweight title belt to the winner of the Takada-Gary Albright match, challenged all other world title claimants to have one single champion. Chono, upon winning the NWA tournament a few days earlier, was asked and said he'd love to defend the title against any challengers including Takada. THESZ and the UWFI tried to seize on that statement and have Takada say he'd wrestle Chono anytime, anyplace, and would do the match for free, as a way, if the match didn't take place, to make it appear Chono was afraid of Takada. Ironically, the shoot grandstand challenge angle is actually an Antonio Inoki specialty, as back in 1973, Inoki challenged Giant Baba under similar circumstances, and Baba never responded to the challenge. New Japan called the UWFI's bluff when Seiji Sakaguchi returned from the US later in the week, saying that if Takada would agree to come to the New Japan office by himself to meet with Riki Choshu and Masa Saito, they would accept the challenge and put the match together. This past Friday, the UWFI hierarchy told reporters to meet them at the New Japan office at 3 p.m. because the meeting was going to take place and they wanted the meeting in front of the press. A horde of reporters were waiting when Ken Suzuki, a member of the UWFI front office and formerly the president of the Takada fan club, came to the New Japan office with Yoji Anjo and Yuko Miyato, 2 UWFI wrestlers who handle most of the matchmaking and decision-making in the front office. The three held a power of attorney letter from Takada which they showed the press, giving each 33% control over decision-making for anything involving Takada. However, the three went into an office with the door closed for a 2.5-hour meeting with Choshu, Saito and 2 others. They came out of the meeting at 5:30 and for the press, Choshu shook hands with Miyato for public consumption and for photos in all the newspapers. Choshu then told the press that he thought it was a good idea to have such a meaningful match. Choshu then complained that nobody from UWFI had called the office before THESZ came and issued the challenge and said it was unprofessional because that's not how deals are made in the real business world. He then questioned THESZ, claiming THESZ was one of the 18 former wrestling legends who voted on New Japan's greatest 18 club world title, which was given to Choshu before the 1991 Tokyo Dome show, and now, 1 year later, he's lending his name to yet a new version of the world title and says this belt is the real world champion. Choshu said that in spite of all that, they sat down and tried to make the match happen anyway, and said they worked out stipulations and agreed to all the UWFI's demands, but said they had their own demands, which both sides agreed would remain confidential, that couldn't get worked out. Miyato at the same time told reporters who left the office with him that there was one point in which they couldn't come to an agreement, but that they may come to an agreement down the line. 3 days later, UWFI held a press conference and claimed New Japan told them they wanted to put together a battle royal on New Year's Eve in Ganryujima in the jungle with no audience, and that New Japan wanted UWFI to pay for being involved. UWFI claimed they were only interested in a Takata Chono unification match and weren't interested in a battle royal. Anyway, that was how the story played in public. In private, New Japan, and Choshu in particular, were mad at UWFI for trying what they considered a cheap play. He was also mad at the editors of the wrestling magazines for giving it so much space because in his mind, they all understand how the wrestling business operates and that this wasn't business at all. But the press played it up as a big story anyway. Apparently, although nobody will say so publicly, in the meeting, New Japan made it clear that if the match were to take place, Chono was going over and that demand wasn't negotiable. The UWFI hierarchy obviously wasn't going to agree. One would think, as we suspected last week, that is where the breakdowns as far as any realistic negotiations probably came from. The rest of the story was just a way to have both sides have a viable story for the press. WCW officially released the complete lineup for the November 18th Clash of Champions TBS special from Macon, Georgia. The show will consist of 1. A Ghetto Odds match, 2-on-3 handicap match, with Ron Simmons and Robbie Walker vs. Cactus Jack and Tony Atlas and Barbarian. 2. Ryan Pillman vs. Brad Armstrong. 3. A 3-round boxing match with Scotty Flamingo vs. Johnny B. Bad. 4. What is billed as a bounty match on the head of Eric Watts with Watts and Kensuke Sasaki vs. Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton. 5. WCW and NWA tag title with Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham vs. Rick Steamboat and Shane Douglas. 6. Rick Rude vs. Sting in a King of Cable semifinal tournament match, the winner of whom will undoubtedly face Big Van Vader in the finals whenever they wind up being. 7. What is being billed as an exhibition with Paul E. dangerously with one hand tied behind his back against Medusa. Looking at the show on paper, the Ghetto Odds match looks terrible unless Cactus Jack is 100% healthy and gets a chance to put on a great individual performance. Simmons can't work with the other two and Walker isn't ready for this kind of spotlight. Pullman Armstrong on a major show should be a good match and could be a great match. 1 year ago, with Armstrong working as Bad Street, the same two stole the show at one of the clashes, although in that specific clash it was petty theft. Worked boxing matches usually look too worked because the punches always look pulled, so the odds are against that one. Watson Sasaki vs. Anderson and Eaton should be decent, although it probably won't be better than decent. Rhodes and Windham vs. Steamboat and Douglas will be interesting. Face versus face matches either work or they don't, and you never know ahead of time. On paper it looks good, but sometimes these matches don't gel. Rude and Sting had very good matches earlier this year, while Paul E vs. Medusa can be entertaining but needs to be kept short or it'll be exposed. I expect good shows from both this clash and the November 25th Titan pay-per-view show because both groups are under pressure because of business being at its weakest state in the past 40 years. There's a lot of controversy regarding calling a match a Ghetto Odds match. The main complaint is that it may have been a viable gimmick in New Orleans 10 years ago. WCW is a national company and it isn't 10 years ago. Playing on race seems to be a constant theme with this company when it gets desperate, which, unfortunately, seems to happen with much regularity. Even more unfortunate is it seems the only way the company knows to run angles with Ron Simmons, and he's the champion. It's actually gotten quite humorous to see the same deja vu patterns within this company. In 1990, Ole Anderson came in as Booker and the first thing he did was bring in Junkyard Dog as the top babyface to feud with Ric Flair and build the whole company around a racial angle, which didn't draw. In 1991, Dusty Rhodes tried the same thing to try and build up Simmons as a title contender against Lex Luger, managed by Harley Race. They ran an angle where a racial remark led to Simmons blowing up an A at a few confrontations during a clash which largely weren't well received. After the fact, everyone in the company started apologizing for how it came out. Everyone pointed fingers at everyone else as to why it got on the air. The remark was cut out of TBS broadcasts because of the heat, but was played over and over again on syndication. This seemingly showed a company wanting to play things both ways, pretending to admit it was uncalled for by cutting it on some shows, but airing it intact on others. They did an almost identical angle with Race, this time managing Super Invader upon Watt's arrival on a later clash. This again resulted in apologies and comments about Race, saying something he shouldn't have said, and how it would be edited. Then a few weeks back, we got those infamous Tony Atlas interviews which apparently caused numerous viewer complaints and were addressed in a TBS meeting with the wrestling higher-ups 2 weeks ago. The result was the interviews being heavily bleeped when they were replayed 2 weeks ago, and this past week not being aired again. Fingers were being pointed everywhere again, with the blame being put on Atlas for not knowing better and saying things that he wasn't told to say. However, when a nearly identical interview aired on WCW Pro in syndication, coupled with the Clash match being called a ghetto odds match, it sure looks like another case of people passing the buck and the company only knowing one way to run an angle with a black babyface. AAA in Mexico City is attempting to duplicate an angle from the past as well, the angle that put the WWF on the entertainment map in 1984. This past Tuesday, on the Veronica Castro talk show, which is the third highest rated primetime television program in Mexico and also has a large following on Spanish stations throughout the United States, they ran a 3-hour special consisting of a series of wrestling matches. The end result was Pero Aguayo saying that he would retire unless he got a hair versus mask match against Mascara Año 2000, and Conan El Barbaro challenging Cien Cars to a match where the loser would have to retire. Earlier in the show, the group did a Titan-like gimmick in which Octagon, Conan, Cien Cars, Universo 2000, Fuerza Guerrera, El Hijo del Santo, Blue Panther, Aguayo, Mascara Año 2000, Kendo Star, Super Muñeco and many others were all singing a song together at the start of the show. The group is attempting to use several celebrities, including Castro and a rock star named Vicente Fernandez, as part of the hype machine to build the show, tentatively scheduled for February at the 30,000-seat Palacio de los Deportes in Mexico City, with some talk of attempting closed circuit or pay-per-view in Mexico as well. Later in the week, when Fernandez was the guest on the same talk show, they brought up wrestling, with Fernandez talking about famous incidents from last year, when referee Gran Davis died and when Conan lost his mask to Aguayo. The scheduled meeting of the Oregon Boxing and Wrestling Commission on Friday to discuss revocation of Sandy Barr's promoter's license was postponed for 6 weeks. The decision to postpone the meeting was because Barr didn't have legal counsel. The ultimate decision on the future of the promotion will be decided by a nonpartisan mediator rather than by Commissioner Bruce Anderson. Anderson had originally called the meeting to discuss closing down the promotion because of what he cited were several violations, including using non-licensed wrestlers, using Art Barr in particular on the October 24 Portland card. In addition, there were complaints about security guards not being licensed, using wrestlers as referees that weren't licensed to handle the refereeing. The commission also was going to discuss sanctions against the World Wrestling Federation for canceling its October date in Portland without adequate notice. Anderson said that by the Athletic Commission bylaws, a poor advance was not a valid reason for canceling a show. It should be noted that the commission itself is in a lot of trouble politically, because the new political regime is seemingly not interested in keeping a boxing and wrestling commission. Gate receipts from both sports in Oregon are so minimal that the taxes don't come close to covering the bill for keeping the commission solvent. Both Barr and the commission seem to be at fault here. The promotion was asking for trouble in using Art Barr, and apparently other non-licensed wrestlers as well, particularly since there has been enough discussion in regard to Barr's licensing status. In addition, Anderson had pretty much made it clear that he'd be willing to approve of Barr being licensed because it had been a long enough time for him to be denied a wrestling license. Barr technically was refused a wrestling license because he had lied on his application about a prior drug conviction, although the reality is he was banned because he pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor sexual assault charge on a plea bargain down from a rape charge. The case had gotten much newspaper publicity, although from a legal standpoint, since it wasn't a felony conviction, they had to use the lying on his license as a reason to deny him his license. At the same time, making a case out of wrestlers refereeing matches because they don't have referees' licenses on small-time shows, the type of which Barr promotes, as being too sticky. Longtime wrestler and promoter Joe Dusek of Omaha passed away on October 31 at the age of 81. Dusek died at Bergen Mercy Hospital in Omaha, which he had been hospitalized since suffering a possible heart attack and a stroke on August 30. Dusek began wrestling in 1932 and teamed with brothers Rudy, Ernie and Emil and the Dirty Dusks, wrestling's Riot Squad, and were the innovators of the heel tag team gimmick. The quartet were big draws in the Midwest for many years. Dusek began promoting a territory based in Omaha in 1957, which had its own wrestlers but was also loosely aligned with the old AWA. He continued promoting the territory through the mid-70s when the territory disbanded, but Omaha became a regular stop on the AWA tour. Dusek remained AWA promoter in Omaha through the mid-80s when crowds dwindled and the AWA lost the city. Dusek's funeral was Wednesday in his hometown, and among the pallbearers were Vern Gagne, Bob Geigel and Stan Big K. Kowalski. Omaha throughout the years under Dusek had a reputation for being per capita one of the consistently biggest drawing cities in the country, with frequent sellouts over the years in the 8,000-seat arena. One of the most memorable runs was in the early 60s when a masked heel named Mr. M. Big Bill Miller drew consistent sellout business facing major babyface brought from around the country. Perhaps the most famous incident occurred in the early 70s, when another masked man, brought in largely to try and duplicate the success Miller had with the masked lead heel gimmick, Tom Andrews, wrestling as the Claw, came off the top rope with a knee drop on Alberto Torres, who was his territory's top babyface at the time, during a tag team match. Torres died a few days later. Dusek brought in Ramon Torres, Alberto's younger brother, for a feud with Claw, which no doubt heated emotions. However, the controversies surrounding the promoting of the feud, with the heel bragging about killing the brother, ended up costing Dusek his television and led to the demise of his territory. A few notes about polls. We'll be taking thumbs up/thumbs down polls for the November 18th Clash and November 25th pay-per-view, but not for the Fox special on November 14th. Also, a correction from last week, the Observer Awards for 1992 will be our 13th annual awards, not 12th annual as last week's issue stated. Balloting for the Observer Awards, of which are the largest of their kind in the world, begins after Thanksgiving. Enough has been written in recent weeks regarding the state of WWF and WCW, and this just is more confirmation. Very sad. Part of the reason for the huge drop in WWF attendance judged against October 1991 is that the first 3 Hogan Flair house shows are included in that month's average. If you take those special shows out of the picture, the real decline is more like 30%, although that's misleading also. This year there were also many shows canceled, which would have certainly, had they been run, resulted in an even lower overall average for the month. Because fewer shows were run this month, combined with the lower average, total gate receipts for the month were down approximately 50%, and with per capita merchandise sales down significantly, that aspect had to decline horrendously. The scary thing is that those of you who have been following the gloom and doom articles written about the declines in Major League Baseball this past summer should note a comparison. Baseball attendance dropped less than 2% during the same period that WWF attendance has been down 30 to 40% and merchandising down ever more. Comparing the much ballyhooed decline in interest in baseball, which has had everyone writing about and giving reasons for in the sports media, realize that wrestling's declines are so much more drastic that they aren't even comparable. All Japan may have shown a slight increase since it was the 20th anniversary tour, while New Japan ran its tag team tournament in October of each year, and as you can see, there was far more interest in the tournament in 1991 because of better quality teams all around, which accounts for much of the decline. Watts' first 5 months versus Frey's first 5 months. Watts. Estimated average attendance 1,800. Estimated average gate $16,020. Average cable rating 1.9. Frey. Estimated average attendance 2,200. Estimated average gate $23,260. Average cable rating 2.4. While on the surface these stats seem to speak louder than any words, there is truth to the argument that Frey's 5 months were in a better time of the year to draw both fans and TV viewers. Frey's decline coming from a strong period to draw in January, to a weak period, May, between his first and last month was 15.6% in attendance, 34% in live gates, based on his mistaken decision to lower ticket prices, and 22% in television ratings, all in 5 months. Some of that decline is due to seasonal variations. Watts has the seasonal variations working in his favor, starting during the so-called weak June to the so-called stronger October. However, business continued to decline at a rate of 39.7% more in attendance, 35% more in live gates and 14% more in television ratings. The only exception to this rule was the last pay-per-view show, in which orders nearly doubled from the 2 previous ones, both of which were the 2 lowest for major promotions in history. While an increase was expected since it had been so long between shows, nearly doubling the 2 previous shows is a very significant improvement. Keep in mind, using wrestling's traditional seasonal variations, Frey's tenure would have shown a small decline anyway, although certainly not at the level his tenure delivered. Watts' seasonal tenure should have shown a small increase rather than the even more rapid decline. These numbers are showing that not only are things continuing to decline under Watts, but if anything, the declining process has been significantly sped up. The most staggering numbers are that comparing the beginning of 1992 with October, WCW attendance has dropped 44%, Gates 57% and cable television ratings 33%. WWF's declines over the same period are 50% in both attendance and Gates and 32% in cable ratings, so if you're tracking, both groups are declining at roughly the same speed. It should be noted that January is by tradition stronger in all three categories than October, so by all rights we should start seeing crowds and ratings grow for both groups just by seasonal variation consistently from this point through April before another seasonal decline starts. Results: October 23, Chicago, WWF, 4,200, Max Moon b Brooklyn Brawler, Jim Duggan b Mountie DQ, Crush b Repo Man, Beverly Brothers b Bushwhackers, Tatunka b Shawn Michaels, Ultimate Warrior b Cmall, sub for Flair, WWF title, Bret Hart b Papa Shango. October 24, Portland, Oregon, USA, Ron Harris b Buddy Wayne, Dirty White Boy NC Jesse Barr, Stop for Blood, Billy Two Eagles b John Rambo DQ, Heavy Metal Incorporated b Jim and Carl Pope, Beetlejuice, Art Barr This Was the Match That Got Them Into Trouble, b Alma Drill, Don Harris b C.W. Bergstrom. October 25, Arena Mexico in Mexico City, EMLL, El Cortado and Alcon Negro Jr. b Talisman Jr. and Metallica Orito and Saigoncito Dragon b New Piratita Morgan and Felinito, Mescara Magica and Mano Negra and Ciclone Ramirez b Guerrero de la Muerte and Guerrero del Futuro and Damien El Guerrero, Negro Casas and Supremo I and Pirata Morgan b Cajos I and Jacques Mate and Massacre, La Fiera and El Satanico and Black Magic b Canadian Vampire Casanova and Dandy and Atlantis. October 28, Jasonville, Indiana, WCW 450, Eric Watts b Scotty Flamingo 1 1/2 star, Steve Austin b Robbie Walker 1 1/2 star, Brian Pillman b Marcus Bagwell 2 stars, Kensuke Sasaki b Diamond Dallas Page 1 1/2 star, Nikita Koloff and Van Hammer and Shane Douglas b Barbarian and Tony Atlas and Rick Rude 2 stars, Big Van Vader b Tom Zenk 2 stars, NWA and WCW tag title, Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham b Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton 2 stars, Sting b Jake Roberts 2 stars. October 29, Danville, Illinois, WCW 400, Eric Watts b Scotty Flamingo 1 star, Brian Pillman b Robbie Walker 1 star, Kensuke Sasaki b Diamond Dallas Page 1 1/4 stars, Steve Austin and Big Van Vader b Marcus Bagwell and Tom Zenk 1 1/2 star, Sting and Van Hammer and Shane Douglas b Cactus Jack and Jake Roberts and Tony Atlas, Sting Pin Jack 23 minutes, 2 stars, U.S. title, Rick Rude b Nikita Koloff 2 stars, NWA and WCW tag title, Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham b Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton 2 stars. October 29, Youngstown, Ohio, WWF 1200, Lance Cassidy b Skinner, Max Moon b Brooklyn Brawler, Beverly Brothers d High Energy, Tatunka b Repo Man, IC title, British Bulldog b Kimala, WWF title, Bret Hart b Papa Shango. October 29, Fukuoka, New Japan, 4386, Osamu Nishimura b Shinjiro Otani, Koji Kanemoto b Satoshi Kojima, Jushin Liger b Hiroyoshi Yamamoto, Keiji Muto and Hiroshi Hashi b Shinya Hashimoto and El Samurai. October 29, Niigata, JWP title tournament round robin matches, Boishoi Kid b Michiko Heki, Cutie Suzuki b Hikari Fukuoka, Devil Masami b Plum Mariko, Dynamite Kansai b Mayumi Ozaki. October 30, Calgary, Rocky Mountain, 100, Jake Steele b Dylan Powers, Shane Croft and Bill Joden b PJ Walker and Jason Helton, Lance Storm b Steve Gillespie, Brett Como b Steve Rivers Core, Chris Jericho b Jerry Morrow DQ. October 30, Metzawal Coyote, UWA Silver King and El Texano and Gran Hamada b Los Villanos 1 4 and v 2.5 stars, Los Reyes Tapatios 1 and 2 b El Resplandor and El Sevillano 2 stars, Tori Infernal and El Signo, and Negro Navarro b Kinect and Dos Caras and Villano 3 1 1/4 stars. October 31, Marion, North Carolina, Fantasy Pro 92. The Drifter b Ricky Bradley, Billy Diamond b Terminator, American GI b Iranian Assassin, Crazy D and Johnny Edker Assassin and Jake Steele, Chris and Jeff Hamrick DJ Eagle and Ricky Starr, Casey Thunder and Jimmy Valiant and John Sullivan b TJ Maverick and the Executioners. November 1, El Toreo in Naucalpan, UWA, Ray Richard and El Engendro b El Matematico I and Rocky Santana, Crazy Stars Uno and Dos and Scorpio Sr. b El Colosso and the King and Transformer, Kendo, Black Power 2 and Scorpio Jr. and Tito Ray DDQ Silver King and Enrique Vieira and Sagrado. Los Villanos I and 3 and 4 B Can-Am Express 1 and 2 Phil Lafon / Dan Crawford and Doug Furness, and Negro Navarro Connect and Dr. Wagner Jr. and the Killer B Tori Infernal and El Signo and Navarro DQ, UWA LTHWT title, El Texano B Villano V DQ to win title. November 1st Burlington, Vermont. Noof Cliff Bart's promoter, 1000 Tony Roy B Terrorizer, Phil Slayer B Freight Train Fulton, Mad Dog Richard B Master Leroy, Hades B Andy Ellison, Brittany Brown B Arctic Fox, Paul Bunyan B Bulldozer, Demolition Axe, Bill Eady, DEQ Jim Neidhart, Road Warrior Hawk B Richard Charlon, Kerry Von Erich B Warlord DQ. November 1st Arena Mexico in Mexico City, EMLL, Los Caifanes 1 and 2 B Misterio Tapatio and El Pegaso, Sambra Poblana and Alcon de Plata B El Mestizo and Buffalo Salvaje, El Brazo and Shogun and Kato Kung Lee Jr. B Kung Fu and Cesar Dantes and America, Los Brazos B Las Cavernicolas, Mascara Magica and King Haku and Canadian Vampire Casanova B Negro Casas and Black Magic and Emilio Charles Jr. November 2nd Odawara, Wings, 2128, Gypsy Joe B Rio Mike, Lucifer B Winger, Jimmy Backlund B Masaru Toy, Crush the Terminator B Leatherface DQ, Kevin Sullivan B Jason the Terrible, Tornado Match, Headhunters and Kim Duke B Mr. Pogo and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga and Mitsutaru Tokuda. November 2nd Memphis, USWA, 1000 Bart Sawyer D Mike Miller, Jeff Gaylord B Tony Williams, Lumberjack match for USWA women's title, Lauren Davenport B Miss Texas to win title, Temple Stock vs Marlin Stock, Jeff Jarrett B Mike Samples, loser leaves town for Southern title, Brian Christopher B Bill Dundee, USWA tag title, Moondogs DDQ Eddie and Doug Gilbert USWA title no DQ, Jerry Lawler B Todd champion to win title. November 3rd Anderson, South Carolina, WCW Pro Taping, 4000 SRO / heavily papered, non-squash results, Rick Steamboat and Tom Zenk B Barbarian and Cactus Jack DQ, Scotty Flamingo B Marcus Bagwell, Steamboat and Shane Douglas B Barbarian and Tony Atlas, Zenk and Johnny Gunn B Vinny Vegas and Diamond Dallas Page, Big Van Vader B Nikita Koloff, Sting B Atlas. November 3rd Louisville, USWA, 1000 Bart Sawyer D Ricky Morton Bill Dundee B Richard Lee, Jeff Jarrett B Moondog Spot DQ, Moondog Spike B Eddie Gilbert DQ, Hair vs Mask, Jerry Lawler B King Killer, Mike Miller, loser leaves town, Brian Christopher B Danny Davis, no DQ match, Lawler and Jarrett and Eddie Gilbert B Moondogs and Miller. November 3rd St. Lucie, Florida, IWF, 500 Brett Blair B Kerry Davis, Brett Colt B Nuclear Assassin No. 2, Nuclear Assassin No. 1 B Chris Proctor to win TV title, Chubby Mo Cool B Possessor DQ, Billy Brooks B Kip Winchester, Street Fight, Dynamite Express B Danny Brown and Cliff Anderson. November 3rd Arena Coliseo in Mexico City, EMLL Eclipse and El Pegaso B Escudero Rojo and El Comodan, Shogun and El Jalisco and Cacho Mendoza B El Panico and Bello Incognito and Alcon Negro Jr. Titan and Espectro Jr. and Gran Marcus Jr. B Triton and Ringo Mendoza and Blue Demon Jr. Group A CMLL World Heavyweight Title Tournament Semifinals, Rayo de Jalisco Jr. B Sultan Gargola, Rick Patterson B MS1 Finals, Jalisco B Patterson to advance to Tournament Final 4. November 3rd Veronica Castro Show Studio in Mexico City, AAA, Blue Panther Cur El Eo del Santo, Fuerza Guerrera B Octagon, Cien Caras and Universo 2000 B Conan El Barbaro and Pero Aguayo DQ. November 3rd Kitagami, Wings, 1058, Gypsy Joe D Masaru Toy, Lucifer D Jimmy Backlund, Leatherface B Jason the Terrible, Crush the Terminator B Headhunter B, Kevin Sullivan and Kim Duke B Mr. Pogo and Mitsutaru Tokuda, Barbed Wire Deathmatch, Mitsuhiro Matsunaga B Headhunter A. November 3rd Shuzenji Now 1280, Kenichi Oya B Neoi, Boro Surumi B Skull Von Krus, Manny Fernandez B Apollo Sugawara, Umanosuke Ueda B Kawabata, Shriki B Alex Porto, Kendo Nagasaki and Oya B Black Bombers, Ebony Experience in GWF. November 4th Sawara Now 1310, Skull Von Krus B Apollo Sugawara, Kenichi Oya B Booker T, Umanosuke Ueda Kurgoro Tsurumi, Kendo Nagasaki and Ishriki B Manny Fernandez and Alex Porto. November 4th Akita, Wings 2408 Gypsy Joe D Mitsutaru Tokuda, Leatherface B Masaru Toy, Crush the Terminator B Kim Duke DQ, Mr. Pogo DDQ Kevin Sullivan, Wings Junior title, Jimmy Backlund B Leatherface, Wings Tag Title, Headhunters be Jason the Terrible and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga. November 5th Fort Bragg, North Carolina, WCW 700, Shanghai Pierce b. Brad Armstrong, Tony Atlas b. Marcus Bagwell, Van Hammer b. Cactus Jack, Shane Douglas and Rick Steamboat b. Brian Pillman and Steve Austin, Big Van Vader b. Nikita Koloff, U.S. Title, Rick Rude d. Kensuke Sasaki, Sting b. Barbarian. November 5th Greensboro, Georgia, WOW, Chaz Rocco b. Jailhouse Rocker, PN News b. Greg Bobkick, Rob Van Dam b. Scott Studd, Bambi b. Peggy Lee Leather, Patriot, Del Wilkes b. Pez Watley. November 5th Beaver Dam, Kentucky, Kentucky Pro, Danny Hayes b. Storm, Skyhawk b. Kentucky Crusher, Devil Dog and Fireman b. Psychedelic Dog and Taz, Hayes b. Dr. X, Nighthawk b. Bill Lewis, Mike Powers b. Ninja Turtle. November 5th San Antonio, WWF, Max Moon b. Terry Taylor, Lance Cassidy b. Brooklyn Brawler, Crush b. Berserker, WWF Tag Title, Money Incorporated b. Natural Disasters, WWF Title, Bret Hart b. Papa Shango, Ultimate Warrior b. Kimala. November 6th Central City, Kentucky, Kentucky Pro, Matt the Lumberjack b. Bill Lewis DQ, American Ninja b. Taz DQ, Young Guns b. Taz and Devil Dog, Fireman b. Maniac, Mike Powers b. Candyman Moss, Skyhawk and Mr. Cool b. D and D Express DQ. November 6th Fort Gay, West Virginia, PWF, 150, Russian Assassin b. Scotty McKeever, Flaming Youth b. Cruel Connection No. 2, George South b. Star Rider, Italian Stallion b. Austin Steele, South 1 Bunkhouse Battle Royal. November 6th Great Neck, New York, UWS, 417, SD Jones d. Chris Michaels, Metal Maniac No. 2 b. Chris Duffy, Gino Caruso b. Kodiak Bear, Haiti Kid b. Butch Cassidy, Demolition Axe and Blast b. Hercules and Boss Hog Calhoun, UWF Title 2 of 3 Falls, Jimmy Snuka b. Greg Valentine. November 6th Roanoke, WCW, 2550, Shanghai Pierce b. Brad Armstrong, Tony Atlas b. Marcus Bagwell, Shane Douglas b. Brian Pillman DQ, Rick Steamboat d. Steve Austin, Big Van Vader b. Nikita Koloff, Van Hammer and Kensuke Sasaki b. Barbarian and Rick Rude, Sting b. Cactus Jack. November 6th Acapulco, AAA winners and Super Colo and Kendo Star b. Fantasma de la Quebrada and Ricky Boy in Heavy Metal, Fantasma and Dragon de Oro and Mascara Sagrada b. Blue Panther and Psychosis and Jerry Estrada 1 3/4 stars, Mask vs. Hair, Rey Mysterio Jr. b. Tony Arce DQ 2 stars, Chavo Guerrero and Angel Blanco Jr. and La Parca b. El Hijo de Lizmark and Octagon 2 1/4 stars, Con and El Barbaro and Cien Caras DDQ Pero Aguayo and El Psicodelico 1/2 star. November 6th Arena Mexico in Mexico City, EMLL Oro and Ultimo Dragon and Kato Kung Lee Sr. b. Negro Casas and Felino and Javier Cruz 3 stars, Group B CMLL World Heavyweight Title Tournament Semifinals, King Haku b. Popotecas 3/4 star, Brasso de Plata b. Aaron Grundy, Mike Norman Shaw Core 1 1/4 stars, Finals Haku b. Brasso de Plata 1 1/2 star, Pierroth Jr. and Canadian Vampire Casanova and Dandy b. Black Magic and Supremo I and La Fiera DQ 2 1/4 stars. November 6th Sapporo Wings 3319, Rio Mike B. Winger, Gypsy Joe D. Mitsuhiro Matsunaga, Masaru Toy B. Winger, Leatherface b. Mitsutaru Tokuda, Coffin Deathmatch, Jason the Terrible b. Lucifer, Barbed Wire Street Fight Deathmatch, Kevin Sullivan and Kim Duke b. Jimmy Backlund, and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga. Wings Tag Team Titles, Mr. Pogo and Crush the Terminator b. Headhunters to win titles. November 6th Dallas Sportatorium, GWF, 750/heavily comped, Bobby Duncombe Jr. b. Dusty Wolf, Rainbow Brown b. The Nuke, Nakona b. Rude Dog DQ, Steve Simpson b. Maniac Mike Lane b. Animal Rough Riders, Black Bart and Johnny Mantell b. Tribal Nation Youngbloods, John Tatum b. Calvin Knapp, Chaz Taylor b. Francis Buxton, Mike Dull b. Killer Tim Brooks DQ, Texas Mustangs, Duncombe and John Hawk b. Rude Dog and Maniac Mike, Al Perez to Rod Price. November 6th Feds Creek, Kentucky, SMW 650 Sellout, Tracy Smothers b. Jimmy Golden, Night Stalker b. Dixie Dynamite, Ron Garvin b. Paul Orndorff, SMW Title, Tim Horner b. Dirty White Boy DQ, SMW Tag Title, Rock and Roll Express b. Heavenly Bodies DQ. November 7th Paintsville, Kentucky, SMW 800 Dixie Dynamite b. Jimmy Golden, Night Stalker b. Rick Newsom, Tracy Smothers b. Killer Kyle, Ron Garvin b. Paul Orndorff, SMW Title, Tim Horner b. Dirty White Boy DQ, SMW Tag Title, Heavenly Bodies b. Rock and Roll Express. November 7th, Morgantown, Kentucky, Kentucky Pro, Fireman B. Taz, Skyhawk B. Maniac, Bad Boys B. Young Guns, Heartbreaker DDQ Red Peters, Ninja Turtle B. Mike Powers DQ. November 7th, Boston WWF, 5500, Max Moon B. Terry Taylor 1 1/2 star, Lance Cassidy B. Skinner 3/4 of a star, Crush B. Berserker 1 1/2 star. WWF Tag Title, Money Incorporated B. Natural Disasters 1 3/4 stars, British Bulldog B. Papa Shango Dud, Cage Match, Nails B. Big Boss Man 1 star, Razor Ramon B. Randy Savage Core 2 1/2 stars. November 7th, Lanier, North Carolina, PWF, 100 Gentleman James B. Scotty McKeever Cruel Connection No. 2 B. Star Rider, George South B. Flaming Youth, Italian Stallion B. Russian Assassin, Stallion 1 Battle Royal. November 7th, Lowell, Massachusetts, WWF, Lance Cassidy B. Berserker, Max Moon B. Terry Taylor Crush B. Skinner, Big Boss Man B. Nails, Natural Disasters and British Bulldog B. Money Incorporated and Razor Ramon, Randy Savage B. Papa Shango. November 7th, Charleston, West Virginia, WCW 1600, Shanghai Pierce B. Brad Armstrong, Shane Douglas and Rick Steamboat B. Brian Pillman and Steve Austin, Van Hammer B. Cactus Jack. U.S. title, Rick Rude D. Kensuke Sasaki, Big Van Vader B. Nikita Koloff, Sting B. Barbarian. November 7th, Nashville, USWA, Mike Miller B. Tony Falk 1 star, Bart Sawyer B. J.D. Wolf 1 star, Jeff Jarrett B. Mike Samples 1 1/2 star, Loser Leaves Town for Southern title, Brian Christopher B. Bill Dundee Core 2 stars, USWA title, Jerry Lawler B. Todd Champion 1 3/4 stars, USWA Tag title, Moondogs DDQ Eddie and Doug Gilbert 3 1/2 stars. November 7th, Portland, Oregon, USA, Bulldog Brian B. Dane Resch, Buddy Wayne D. Carl Pope, Jim Pope B. Max Steele, C.W. Bergstrom B. Alma Drill, Ron and Don Harris B. Billy 2 Eagles and Mike Winner. November 7th, Katsuda, now 1790, Apollo Sugawara B. Kawabata, Alex Porto B. Naoi, Stevie Ray B. Kenichi Oya, Kendo Nagasaki B. Booker T, Manny Fernandez and Umanosuke Ueda B. Sugawara and Goro Surumi, Ishinriki B. Skull Von Kruss. November 7th, Chatsworth, Georgia, Mountain Wrestling Federation, Hot Rock Regal B. Mike Jordan, Greg Sawyer B. Steve Strong, Young Stallion B. Jimmy Sharp, Woody Woodchuck and Strong B. Hurricane Willie and Congo the Moroccan Warrior, Tony Vendetta B. David Young, Larry Santana B. Regal. November 7th, Nobioka All Japan Women, 1350, Bat Yoshinaga B. Kwaro Ito, Suzuka Minami B. Cynthia Moreno, Bull Nakano and Yumiko Hata B. Tashio Yamada and Takako Inoue, Minami Toyota B. Tomoko Watanabe, Akira Hokuto and Mima Shimoda and Etsuko Mita B. Asia Kong and Miori Kamiya and Kyoko Inoue. November 7th, Mito, LLPW, 200, prelim results unavailable, Rumi Kazama B. Nagashima and Kitagami, Shinobu Kondori and Norio Tadano B. Harley Saito and Eagle Sawai. November 8th, Knoxville, SMW 350, Dutch Mantel B. Robbie Eagle, Night Stalker B. Dixie Dynamite, Tracy Smothers B. Killer Kyle, Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden B. Bobby and Jackie Fulton DQ, Ron Garvin B. Paul Orndorff DQ, SMW title no DQ match, Dirty White Boy Dicker Tim Horner, SMW tag title Heavenly Bodies B. Rock and Roll Express. November 8th, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, WCW, 2090. Brad Armstrong v. Shanghai Pierce 1 star, Eric Watts D. Steve Austin 2 stars, Rick Steamboat K. Brian Pillman 3 stars, Van Hammer b. Barbarian Dud, U.S. title, Rick Rude b. Kensuke Sasaki Dud, Big Van Vader b. Nikita Koloff 1/2 of 1 star, Sting b. Tony Atlas -1 star, NWA and WCW tag title, Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham b. Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton 2 stars. November 8th, West Palm Beach, WWF, Tito Santana b. Brooklyn Brawler, Tatunka b. Blake Beverly, Virgil b. Genius, Head Shrinkers b. High Energy Ultimate Warrior b. Kimala, WWF title, Bret Hart b. Rick Martel. November 8th, Orlando, WWF, 2500, Tito Santana b. Brooklyn Brawler 1 1/4 stars, Tatunka b. Blake Beverly Core 1 3/4 stars, Shawn Michaels b. Virgil 2.5 stars, Ultimate Warrior b. Kimala 1 star, Head Shrinkers b. High Energy 2 3/4 stars, WWF title, Bret Hart b. Rick Martel Dud. November 8th, Dallas, Big D 45, Big D b. Ray Evans, S. Braddock b. Terry Sims, John Tatum b. Steve Simpson, Mike Dahl b. Ray Evans, Bill Irwin b. Gary Young, King Parsons and Action Jackson b. Awesome Kong and King Kong DQ. November 8, Douglasville, Georgia, All South, 119 Tim Strong v. Rodney Cowan, ex-convict Snake v. Mike Kurbich. Street fight loser must retire, Tommy Rich v. Steve Lawler, Jailhouse Rocker and Glenn Gilbernetti DDQ Lee Thomas and Scott Studd. November 9, Raleigh, WCW 1500 Cactus Jack v. Mike Graham, Van Hammer v. Tony Atlas, Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton v. Marcus Bagwell and Eric Watts, Barbarian v. Brad Armstrong, NWA and WCW Tag Title, Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham v. Brian Pillman and Steve Austin, Big Van Vader v. Rick Steamboat, U.S. Title, Sting v. Rick Rude DQ. November 9, Barberville, Kentucky, SMW 600, Night Stalker v. Dixie Dynamite, Tracy Smothers beat Jimmy Golden, Ron Garvin v. Paul Orndorff, SMW Title, Tim Horner v. Dirty White Boy DQ, SMW Tag Title, Rock and Roll Express v. Heavenly Bodies DQ. Special thanks to Mark DeMatteis, Gary Langevin, Dan Paris, John Lawson, Jeff Cohen, Steve Dr. Lucha Sims, Matt Lawrence, Luis Fortuna, Jerry Lane, Gene Ristiano, Lloyd Lee, Freddie Fargo, Mike Gunter, Ron Lemieux, Bruce Mitchell, Steve Prozik, John Clark. AAA. Another major angle took place on November 6 in Acapulco during a mask versus hair match with Rey Mysterio Jr. versus Tony Arce. Mysterio had the original Rey Mysterio as his second while Arce was seconded by Blue Panther. Panther interfered and slugged Mysterio Jr. for the DQ in the first fall, which although sounding like a common finish, outside interference DQs are a rarity in Mexico. Arce won the second fall. In the third fall, there was a referee bump when Arce accidentally elbowed El Tirantes. As you can see, AAA is copying the US for gimmick finishes, and Panther interfered again. Mysterio Sr. jumped in the ring, but first took off his shoes and then removed his mask revealing Love Machine, Art Barr, who Panther had a huge feud with in EMLL last year which climaxed in a mask versus mask match that drew more than 20,000 fans which Love Machine lost via DQ and Panther left for this group before they could build to another big gate. Machine chased Panther to the back while in the ring Mysterio Jr. had Arce in the abdominal stretch and Tirantes raised Rey's hand, and Arce lost his hair. That same card had what is known in Mexico as a Parejas Increíbles match, which basically means two men feuding are put together as a tag team against two others who are feuding, so it had Conan and Cien Caras against Pero Aguayo and El Psicodelico, who has to be the worst excuse for a main event heel in wrestling today. In the third fall, Psicodelico gave both Conan and then partner Aguayo a low blow, then gave ref Pepe Casas one as well. The ref ruled it no decision. With the ref, Aguayo and Conan on the mat selling the low blow, Chavo Guerrero jumped Caras and the two brawling to the back. In a trios match on the same card, Guerrero and La Parca and Angel Blanco Jr. beat Lismark and Elio de Lismark in Octagon when Parca pinned Lismark to win both the second and third falls to set up Lismark defending his national light heavyweight belt against Parca next week. In title matches this past week, Misterioso and Volador retained the Mexican tag belts beating Baby Sharon and the Rose on November 1 in Menda, and Blue Panther kept the Mexican middleweight belt beating Pantrita del Ring on November 1 in Monterrey. Angel Azteca has been given some time off. The group's first major card in Mexico City will be on November 20 at El Juan de la Barrera, a 10,000-seat arena. They have also signed to run weekly Wednesday night shows at Arena Lopez Mateo, a former EMLL weekly arena when the owner of the arena switched because he felt EMLL was sending better shows to Arena Naucalpan the same night. Since the owner of Arena Naucalpan, who is the father-in-law of Ultimo Dragon, is the new EMLL booker. The reason for the strange title change where Mysterio Jr. won the Mexican welterweight belt from Fantasma de la Quebrada as reported last week was because Quebrada had contacted this group about jumping and promoter Antonio Pena agreed to bring him in provided he drop his strap to Mysterio in return. Quebrada then debuted with this group on Friday night. This puts AAA wrestlers in control of every Mexican national title except the heavyweight and the women's title, which EMLL controls. It appears Super Astro is going to jump back to UWA. Expect a major push for Dragon de Oro, who worked previously for EMLL using ring names Metallico with Oro and Plata as a trio, and La Mascara. Eddie Guerrero is scheduled to start up in 2 weeks and form a tag team with Santo A, the new Atomic Pair, since the original Atomic Pair consisted of Gory Guerrero and Al Santo. Monster Ripper, Rhonda Singh, is headed into feud with Lola Gonzalez, while Lady Apache of EMLL has a meeting about jumping this week. EMLL. The biggest news from here is the CMLL World Heavyweight Title Tournament. They are running 4 different 4-man tournaments to lead to the Final Four on November 13 at Arena Mexico. The first tournament on November 3 at Arena Coliseo was won by Rayo de Jalisco Jr., beating Rick Patterson in the finals. The second was November 6th at Arena Mexico, won by King Haku, pinning Brazo de Plata in the finals. The final two were November 7th at Arena Pista Revolucion and November 8th at Arena Mexico. La Sirenita kept the Mexican women's title, beating La Diabolica on November 3rd in Morelia. Since AAA will be running its first major Mexico City house show on November 20th, this group is countering with a major card at Arena Mexico, with the current plan being a trios match with Canek and Mil Mascaras and Dos Caras teaming together for the first time in that building. Rayo de Jalisco Jr. missed a few matches last week because of chest pains, but his EKG came out negative and he's back at work. UWA El Texano won the UWA light heavyweight title from Villano V on November 1st at El Toreo. Third fall finish saw both seconds, Silver King and Villano 4, falling outside the ring, and V5 gave Texano a piledriver, banned in Mexico, although Texano used the same move on Villano 4 to start the feud between the two sides. The ref DQ'd V5 for the interference of his brother, not the piledriver. Earlier in the card, Villanos Uno and Tres and Cuatro beat the Can-Am Express and Negro Navarro to set up Can-Am's defending the UWA tag titles against Villanos Cuatro and V on the November 8th show at El Toreo. That card is headlined by a unique tag team tournament. It'll have 8 teams, and the losers, not the winners, advance in the tournament until the losers of the championship each either both have to remove their mask or get their heads shaved. The 8 teams entered are Canek and the Killer, Tori Infernal and Mystery Partner, Dr. Wagner Jr. and Shu El Guerrero, Transformer, and the King, Celestial, and El Coloso, Villanos Uno and Tres, Crazy Stars and Silver King and Texano. Villano Tres beat El Signo to keep the WWF light heavyweight title on October 29th in Mexico City. The two had a rematch on November 6th in Netzahualcoyotl for television tapings. Peligro magazine had an article this past week interviewing a very bitter Dos Caras, who doubles as one of the leading officers of the SNL union, talking about striking the smaller Mexico City arenas that AAA promotes. Caras claimed the AAA union hasn't officially registered, as is required by law, with the Board of Conciliation and Arbitration, so that would be the technical reason for the strike. Caras claims AAA is exaggerating their gates tenfold but is lying on the tax form, since he said the tax forms state that Aguayo, Santo and Octagon earned $257 to $322 per show, when he claims the real figures are $644 for Octagon, $1,287 for Santo and $1,931 for Aguayo. He also warned any wrestlers thinking of jumping that the money AAA promises doesn't always turn out to be there, and that many want to jump back, although thus far almost nobody has. He said if a wrestler leaves the union, which governs EMLL and UWA wrestlers, and wants to rejoin it, there would be a $3,200 fine against mid-card wrestlers and a $16,000 fine levied against main eventers, which by the standards in Mexico is incredibly stiff. Japan. Both All Japan and New Japan were off this week, with All Japan starting the tag team tournament on Saturday and New Japan starting its new tour on Tuesday. Road Warrior Hawk and Kensuke Sasaki are going to be a regular full-time tag team with New Japan starting November 22nd under the name The New Road Warriors. This, among many other things, has caused some very bitter feelings with Animal, who after quitting WWF made an attempt to join New Japan as Hawk's partner, which Hawk himself didn't know about and didn't want, and has caused some bitter feelings to come out between the two. Hawk and Sasaki will debut as a team against Riki Choshu and Hiroshi Hashi on November 22nd at Sumo Hall. Also debuting for New Japan on those cards, besides Genichiro Tenryu being officially announced, although Tenryu will still only work mid-card matches against the Skinheads, is Ultimo Dragon, who will challenge El Samurai for the IWGP Junior title on November 23rd. Working planned for the January 4th Tokyo Dome show is Choshu vs Tenryu, Steiners vs New Road Warriors, and possibly Antonio Inoki and Hulk Hogan as a tag team, although no deal has been made with Hogan. And I've heard speculation as well about an NWA vs IWGP World Title Unification match. I'm guessing Sting will win the IWGP title from Muto on November 22nd, and Chono at the Dome. Jushin Liger is going to Germany in December. New Japan has announced it'll run fewer major shows in 1993. Biggest shows will be January 4th Tokyo Dome, February 16th Sumo Hall, August 2nd to August 8th 7 consecutive nights in Sumo Hall, August 26th Osaka Castle Hall, and September 23rd Yokohama Arena. Oriental Pro Wrestling had a card booked for November 18th at Korakuen Hall, which it announced would be a joint show with Now and Wings. However, Now pulled out of the show except for Goro Tsurumi, who is a good friend from way back with OPW head Ryu Mago. In addition, things aren't settled as far as Wings' involvement either. The main event will apparently be the finals of the International Tag Team Tournament from Portland with Jesse Barr and Go vs. Ron and Don Harris. All Japan's television special on October 31st with the Misawa vs. Kawada match drew an 8.3 rating, while the regular show on November 1st did a 3. August 3.0. All Japan Women had a show on October 21st taped from Mexico City which did a 1.2 rating, while PWFG aired its October 4th Tokyo Dome card on October 28th doing a 1.3 rating. All Japan has another Saturday afternoon historical special airing the best and worst of wrestling with a 1966 Giant Baba vs. Fritz Von Erich match, a 1975 Kentaro Oki vs. Abdullah the Butcher, a 1989 Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith vs. Stan Hansen and Terry Gordy, the legendary 1990 Jumbo Sereda vs. Mitsuharu Misawa match where Misawa won, and the 1987 Giant Baba vs. Raja Lion match which is one of the worst matches ever. Rings karate fighter Masaaki Sadake suffered a broken leg and is out of the Mega Battle tournament. Sadake is the only regular who hasn't done a job yet in rings, and there was a good chance he was being programmed to face Akira Maeda in the tournament finals originally. Based on the bracketing, it appeared the semifinals in December at Ariake Coliseum would be Sadake vs. Dirk Leon Frey and either Chris Dolman or Andrei Kopylov vs. Maeda. Now, barring a surprise, the January finals took to be Maeda vs. Frey. FMW starts its tag team tournament on November 20th with these teams: Atsushi Onita and mystery partner Tarzan Goto and Big Titan, Samba Asako, and Haystacks Calhoun, Tiger Jeet Singh Jr. and Senior Gladiator and Horace Boulder, Sabu and Kareem Sudan, Dr. Lucer and Dr. Hannibal Letcher, Psychos number 1 and number 2 and Alligator Man number 1 and number 2. Calhoun is said to be a 400-pounder from Los Angeles. Kareem Sudan is Don White from St. Louis, who does an Abdullah gimmick. From what I understand, he's horrible. Join the crowd. Dr. Hannibal is from Edmonton. Alligator Men are from Michigan. Don't know about Psychos. The injury reported last week to Eriko Tsuchiya, the FMW woman who had been working All Japan Women's Tag Tourney, was a work. Apparently Onita pulled his team, using the injury as an excuse, because they were doing so many jobs on the tour. From what I understand, the fans also were seeing the huge skill difference between Tsuchiya and Yukari Matamari of FMW with the All Japan Women, and it made the idea of putting the FMW girls over anyone look bad. Terry Power returns to All Japan Women on November 16th after having 3 knee operations since August. Complete November 26th Big Show in Kawasaki now has Itsuko Mita and Mima Shimoda vs. Miori Kamiya and Mimi Numata, Tomoka Watanabe defending the Japanese title against Kaoru Ito. Saki Hasegawa vs. Debbie Malenko, Yumiko Hata and Suzuka Minami vs. Takako Inoue and Terry Power. Bat Yoshinaga defends WWWA Martial Arts title against Kyoko Kamikaze in what will apparently be a shoot boxing match. Kyoko Inoue defends Pacific title against Akira Hokuto. Toshio Yamada and Manami Toyota defend WWWA tag titles against Dynamite Kansai and Mayumi Ozaki of JWP, and WWWA singles title with Bull Nakano defending against Asia Kong. Hata and Minami are working one JWP show in exchange for Kansai and Ozaki working the All Japan Women's show. Wings drew a legit big crowd of 3,319 in Sapporo on November 6th as Mr. Pogo and Crush the Terminator won the Wings tag team titles from the Headhunters when Terminator pinned Hunter A after a moonsault in 14:36. The gimmick-laden show also had Kevin Sullivan and Kim Duke over Jimmy Backlund and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga in a barbed wire street fight death match, and Jason the Terrible over Lucifer in a coffin match. November 4th and Akita saw Hunters keep the belts beating Jason and Matsunaga, while Jimmy Backlund kept the Wings Junior title beating Lucifer with a sleeper. The next big Wings gimmick match will be a ring surrounded by 10,000 nails match with Matsunaga vs. Duke. Many years ago Antonio Inoki had a similar ring surrounded by nails match against Umanosuke Ueda. It appears, although this hasn't been announced, that UWFI is working on a double main event for late December at Sumo Hall with Nobuhiko Takada vs. Naoki Sano and Gary Albright vs. Koji Kiao. Japanese television rundown. October 4th All Japan. 1. Kenta Kobashi pinned Jun Akiyama in a tape of Akiyama's debut match. Only highlights aired, but it looked really good. Kobashi used a new finisher, turning an abdominal stretch into a powerbomb. 2. Giant Baba and Masa Fuchi and Akiyama beat Dory Funk and Patriot and Johnny Smith when Baba pinned Smith with a leg sweep. Match was okay since Baba wasn't in the ring much. 1 3/4 stars. 3. Terry Gordy and Steve Williams and Richard Slinger beat Mitsuharu Misawa and Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. Fast-paced great match. Lots of kicking out of big moves, which turned the heat up big. Kobashi in particular was hot, gaining near falls on all three foes. Finish saw Kikuchi come off the top, but Williams caught him coming off and stampeded him 3 3/4 stars. 4. Jumbo Sereda and Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa beat Stan Hansen and Johnny Ace and Pete Roberts. Roberts, who is 50 and has been wrestling 34 years, showed his age as he's lost a step in the usual fluid sequences. Ogawa wound up pinning Roberts with a bridging back suplex. 2.5 stars. October 18th, All Japan. 1. Fuchi pinned Ogawa to keep the PWF Junior title. Only the finish aired and it went back and forth with near falls. The wrestling itself was good, but there wasn't much emotion or heat. 2. Hanson and Ace beat Kobashi and Kawada. Really brutal match. At one point Hanson back suplexed Kawada on the floor and his head made a heavy thud against the concrete, which must have done wonders for his brain cells. Kobashi got a huge bruise on his hamstring while doing a dive out of the ring. He didn't act hurt and bit and wasn't slowed. The finishing sequence was really exciting, including Kobashi gain a near fall on Hanson that looks for sure and Hanson DDT Kawada on the floor. Hanson finally pinned Kobashi with a lariat 3 3/4 stars. 3. Misawa pinned Tao. The first part of the match was pretty slow and it actually got boring. After Misawa kicked out of 2 golden arm bombers, the heat really picked up. The last few minutes were excellent, with Misawa scoring a pin after a second Tiger Driver, double arm suplex dropped into power bomb. 3 1/2 stars. October 24th, New Japan. 1. El Samurai and Koji Kanemoto beat Jushin Liger and Hiroyoshi Yamamoto in 15:55. Very good, with Liger spectacular as usual, although no sensational dives out of the ring. Finish saw Samurai reverse a Liger power bomb and score a surprise pin. 3 1/2 stars. 2. Scott Norton pinned Tony Halme to become the #1 contender for the IWGP title. Halme is starting to improve and gets a lot of heat when he throws punches. But both guys got really tired, and the fact that neither can carry a match really showed. Norton won with a shoulder block and power slam in 9:15 3/4 star. 3. Skinheads beat Riki Choshu and Tatsumi Fujinami and Takayuki Iizuka and Osamu Kido in 14:39. Heat was good, but not nearly on the level it was for the Skinheads matches even a month earlier. Koshinaka juiced heavy. Too much was going on too fast and there was no flow. Aoyagi kicked Kido in the head and Kimura pinned him. 2 3/4 stars. October 25th, All Japan. 1. Haruka Eigen and Motoshi Okuma and Fuchi beat Rusher Kimura and Mighty Inoue and Ryuma Izumida in 12:38 when Eigen pinned Izumida. Comedy match with all the same spots they always do. Izumida now does a funny spot as he crawls on his head to make the tag and everyone laughs. Real bad. Dud. 2. Andre the Giant and Sereda and Gordy beat Funk and Baba and Hanson. Okay, nobody expected this to be good wrestling. Actually, Andre was so bad and was the focal point of the match to the point it was terrible. Andre can barely climb into the ring. Gordy really dropped some weight again because Hanson looked to have him by 35 pounds and Gordy used to outweigh Stan. Baba and Andre were in against each other for a few minutes and it was worse than it sounds. Andre's big foot now only gets as high as the opponent's knee. Seriously, it was just sad seeing him in the ring. Terry Funk tried to attack Andre outside the ring, but even that was bad because Andre just can't do anything. Sereda pinned Dory with a double reverse cradle. No reaction at all to the finish. Dud. October 31st, All Japan. 1. Tao and Ogawa beat Kikuchi and Akiyama. Good pacing and Kikuchi was great here on offense. Tao pinned Akiyama with the arm bomber 3 1/2 stars. 2. Williams and Spivey beat Patriot and Kobashi. Only the last few mid-aired, but it looked good with near falls. Patriot missed the Patriot missile and Williams stampeded him 3 1/4 stars. 3. Misawa pinned Kawada in 29:52 of the Dream match. The anticipation of this match was one of the greatest in recent years and the heat was outstanding before they even locked up. It wasn't the greatest match of all time, but it wasn't a disappointment in the least. They used a lot of submissions which are really over, so they didn't do as many big moves as you'd imagine, but what they did was all excellent. First 20 minutes were good and last 10 minutes were excellent with all the near falls until Misawa used 2 tiger suplexes to get the win. I would rate this as equivalent to Rude Chono or Heart Bulldog. Not as many hot moves as the other two, but the submissions made it more realistic. 4 1/2 stars. USWA. Jerry Lawler regained the USWA title from Todd CF champion on November 2nd in Memphis in the no DQ match where Lawler got to pick the surprise referee. Lawler picked Jeff Jarrett as referee. Champion decked Jarrett a few times during the match. Finally Lawler pulled down the strap and used a fist drop off the middle rope. Burt Prentice broke up with pin. As Jarrett was running Prentice out of the ring, champion pulled out a chain and hit Lawler. As Jarrett was counting the pin, he saw the chain in champion's hand and stopped the count and started arguing with him and they struggled over the chain. Lawler then schoolboyed champion from behind and Jarrett used the fast 3 count. As is customary, the title also changed hands November 7th in Nashville and will change hands again on November 10th in Louisville. They were scheduled for a title rematch on November 9th and Prentice said that a friend of his from the WWF would be brought in to referee. Prentice also said that managers had been coming into Memphis for 30 years trying to finish off Lawler, and that he was the one who was going to get it done. I'm sure Lawler loved that 30 years comment. It appears that the weekly shows at Evansville, Indiana are no more, a victim of falling attendance, and they'll be replaced by weekly Wednesday night shows in Jackson, Tennessee with Buddy Wayne as the promoter. In other highlights of the November 2nd show, Jeff Jarrett beat Mike Samples in what was billed as Samples putting up his 20% of the company against Eddie Marlin's 20%, and Brian Christopher beat Bill Dundee in a loser leaves town match. A new tag team called the American Eagles debuted, who are Dundee and Danny Davis, who lost to Christopher in a loser leaves town match the prior week. Christopher came out for an interview and the Eagles came out of the dressing room and just stared at him and he freaked out. Later in the show, Christopher was told his opponent on November 9th for the Southern title would be Tony Williams, and Christopher laughed and challenged him to a loser leaves town match. Tony said no, that he liked living there and didn't want to leave, and Christopher kept calling him a chicken until the Eagles showed up again and just stared and freaked Christopher out. Finally, in a tag match with Williams and Bart Sawyer versus Christopher and Samples, the Eagles came out again while Christopher was destroying Williams, and this time Williams pinned Christopher and Christopher demanded a tag match against the Eagles. Complete November 9th lineup has Tony Falk versus Mike Miller, Sawyer versus Jeff Gaylord, Christopher versus Williams for the Southern title, Jarrett versus Samples, and if Samples wins, he gets 5 minutes in the ring with Eddie Marlin, and if Jarrett wins, he gets 5 minutes with Prentice. Lawler versus champion with Prentice's special ref for the USWA title, Moondogs versus Eddie and Doug Gilbert in a cage match for the USWA tag title, and Christopher and Gaylord versus Eagles. SMW. Kevin Sullivan's debut aired this past weekend on television. Dutch Mantel opened the show and said there was a van in the parking lot with followers all around it. At the end of the show, Sullivan came out, and when Lee tried to jump him, Sullivan threw a fireball in his face and then massacred him with a spike. In reality, Lee pulled out a blade, and as he was doing the dirty deed, Sullivan kicked his hand, which jabbed the blade, and so deep a bucket of blood was pouring out. Night Stalker and Grim Reaper, Rob Monroe from Pittsburgh, kept all the jobbers from making the save until a cameraman ran in and Sullivan kicked him. Bob Caudle even went to the ring to attempt to make the save, but before he got there the face dressing room emptied out. Lee did a stretcher job. Bob Armstrong came out to finish the show saying that Sullivan was banned for life. Life sentences in this part of the country must have the possibility of parole in 2 weeks. Earlier in the show, Dirty White Boy won a squash and kept beating on the guy and challenging Tim Horner until Horner made the save. White Boy ran. Horner then confronted Ron Wright and spun his wheelchair around and around until he was dizzy. Danny Davis did an interview from home with a neck brace on, saying he couldn't wrestle for a while, but he would be in Ron Garvin's corner for his matches against Paul Orndorff. Orndorff said that he could beat both men at the same time, which will set up a series of handicap matches for the Thanksgiving Thunder Tour. The tour will have shows November 26th in Hazard, Kentucky, November 27th in Welch, West Virginia, November 28th in Johnson City, and November 29th in Knoxville. The Heavenly Bodies and Rock and Roll Express will have 4 title matches, a Falls Count Anywhere match, a street fight, a barbed wire match, and a death match. Kevin Sullivan versus Mongolian Stomper, Horner versus White Boy, Garvin and Davis versus Orndorff, and Bobby and Jackie Fulton versus Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden. Although Jackie Fulton is scheduled for the All Japan Tag Tourney, so that'll have to be changed. The Television Dream match saw Bobby versus Jackie Fulton, which saw them trade hold on the mat. Fuller and Golden came out and said the match was so boring. After the obligatory accidental ref bump, Fuller hit Bobby with a foreign object, but Jackie wouldn't pin him and instead chased Fuller and Golden out. White Boy and Horner had a really wild match in Knoxville on November 8th, brawling all over to a double count out in a no DQ match. The Rock and Roll vs. Bodies title matches either have seen the Bodies win when Jim Cornette hits Robert Gibson with a racket, or the Rander win via DQ, so the Bodies kept the belts. Texas. Not as much goofy stuff this week at the global tapings. Francis Buxton did an interview and gave Doyle King a letter from his mother to read to the fans. In it, his mother asked the fans to quit calling him Crybaby since it was so upsetting and asked, instead, for the fans to call him their champion. She said fans calling him Crybaby had disturbed him to the point he's wetting his bed again. If that wasn't classy enough, they had a match where Maniac Mike and Rude Dog lost to the Texas Mustangs. John Hawk and Bobby Duncombe Jr. A woman came to ringside with a cat on a leash and Rude Dog started chasing them around ringside, leaving Mike alone to get pinned. It was announced the November 13th show will be a surprise homecoming party for Kerry Von Erich, who did an interview on the show. Some of the wrestlers were pretty upset by Von Erich's appearance at the show the previous week because he walked in like he was Hulk Hogan and wanted everything done his way. Brody Powers no-showed the main event against Rod Price and was replaced by Al Perez. Former heel Commissioner Joe Castellini will become the new color commentator. November 13th at the Sportatorium has Metal Maniac and Maniac Mike vs. Tribal Nation, Duncombe Jr. vs. Johnny Mantell, Steve Simpson vs. John Tatum, Hawk vs. Black Bart, Mike Dull vs. Rude Dog, and the return of Ebony Experience. Here and there. HBO is toying with the idea of doing a dramatic TV series with a wrestling backdrop. Eric Embry's physical condition improved dramatically over the past week after a major auto accident. Embry's liver was severely bruised but there was no bleeding. Embry will need a knee operation but the doctors want to wait a few weeks to do so. He's been released from the hospital and is resting at home. The current prognosis is it'll be about 4 months before he can return to the ring. Several IWF wrestlers and working the Thunderdome show at Universal Studios in Orlando. Hercules is working main events for the group. Dennis Corralizzo's WWA has a show November 28th in Clementon, New Jersey with Chris Candido vs. Ray Odyssey, Lightning Kid vs. Bill Wilcox in what should be a battle of high-risk moves, and Tank and Samurai Warrior, from Florida, vs. Boy Gone Bad and Spider. Former football player and wrestler Russ Francis is now doing color commentary for college football on Prime Network. Condolences go out to Billy Anderson on the passing of his mother. Billy Jack Haynes has made noises about opening up a promotion in Oregon. The commission has made it clear that the promoter will not be allowed to wrestle on his own shows, and Haynes' name value in Oregon as a wrestler would be his greatest plus. Sandy Barr's weekly Portland shows are down below 150 per week again, and they're giving away free passes at a local furniture store starting this week. They had a new tag team called the Metal Maniacs who were said to have been in first place in the tag team tournament and Ron and Don Harris in second. The team was composed of Bo Silvers and Max Steele. Silvers then left after 2 weeks and the promotion created the storyline that the Harris brothers paid him to leave so they'd be in first place. Guys are now getting 2 nights of work per week in this territory with $50 payoffs each show. Road Warrior Hawk had his first match since leaving the WWF on November 1st in Burlington, Vermont, beating Richard Charlon on a Cliff Bart's Indy which drew 1,000. Biff Wellington suffered 3 cracked ribs and a torn shoulder muscle when he tried a backflip out of the corner, and his feet slipped on the top rope and he landed on his neck and head. Tony DeMora, Tony Capone, and his NAWA has filed for bankruptcy. DeMora is also in trouble with the police according to an article in the Local People from a booking in Meriden, Connecticut. The story said DeMora booked the school gym for a benefit for the Mount Vernon Police Benevolent Association, but the police in Mount Vernon claimed it was misrepresentation and they didn't know anything about the show. DeMora denied he told the school it was a benefit show even though the rental agreement the school has lists the police as the benefactor of the show. Kevin Corley, 46, a 6'3", 280-pound British wrestler died after collapsing in the ring recently in a battle royal in Lewisham, South London. Tommy Rich beat Steve Lawler in a loser must retire match on November 8th in Douglasville, Georgia when Rich pinned manager Stephen DeTruth after a piledriver. Lawler is legitimately retiring due to nagging injuries, although he is going to work some shows as the Masked Brawler before hanging it up. The match saw both men juice and DeTruth wore surgical gloves to ringside. WCWA has an Iron Man format, similar to the 1989 WCW Starrcade pay-per-view format, with Rod Price, Gary Key, Larry Ludden and Terry Zeller on December 12th at Santa Margarita High School in El Toro, California. WCW. Ron Simmons is out of action, probably through the end of this week, although he'll wrestle at the Clash. He was injured last week in Chicago. He made appearances either doing an interview or being in Sting's corner at all the house shows. It was really good for him to appear because they had decent, by today's standards, houses over the weekend, and you don't want to leave fans in cities that there is still interest leaving feeling ripped off. With Jake Roberts gone and Simmons unable to work, The advertised top matches were going to have to be rearranged anyway, which never leaves fans thrilled. Jim Herd made a presentation on October 30th to Bill Shaw and Bob Dway about the possibility of Herd and Jarrett working together to use the younger talent that needs seasoning on USWA house shows. WCW has a European tour set for March 11th to 17th. They'll be having Thunderdome cage matches on November 25th in Baltimore and Thanksgiving night at the Omni with Cactus Jack and Big Van Vader and Rick Rude and a mystery partner, originally Jake Roberts, versus Ron Simmons and Sting and Nikita Koloff and Van Hammer. Hammer will be getting a big push once again. Several New Japan wrestlers are said to be coming in for Starrcade, probably Great Muta, Masa Chono, Hiroshi Hashi and Kensuke Sasaki. Joey Maggs tore up his knee and will be out 4 to 6 weeks when Brian Pillman clipped him too high during a taping match in Anderson, South Carolina. The injuries to Joe Thurman from that Vader powerbomb aren't nearly as serious as first thought. The guy in the kendo outfit sparring with Medusa on the video that aired Sunday was Eric Bischoff. Bet you didn't have any idea the guy was that good with his hands and feet. Despite rumors you may have heard, officially there is no change in the status of Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton. They surely won't be offered an extension of their current contracts, and as far as I know they haven't even been offered new contracts. Current deals expire after the Tokyo Dome card. Television on Saturday was pretty good considering the circumstances, which included a fairly dead crowd during many of the matches and 2.5 hours being awfully long. The Robbie Walker match should have never made television. Eric Watts is actually getting good considering how few matches he's had, but this push gets more unbearable by the week. They ran B shows for the first time in months with cards in Jasper, Georgia, Dalton, Georgia and Sweetwater, Tennessee, with the first two drawing in the 350 to 400 range and the third drawing 600 with Wyndham and Rhodes versus Anderson and Eaton on top. The wrestlers all received a memo on November 9th in Raleigh telling them they were all going to be drug tested on November 11th because Watts said he's concerned about the abuse of illegal drugs within the company. The letter specifically stated they aren't testing for alcohol or marijuana. It didn't state one way or the other about steroids, although from the looks of everyone, use is way down, which I attribute more to a lack of supply rather than conscious decisions to quit in some cases, but not all. For the first time ever, Power Hour was the highest-rated WCW show of the weekend, doing a 2.0 on October 31st. Saturday Night also did a 2.0 for the post-pay-per-view show, while Main Event did a 1.4. The Sunday ratings are considered at the crisis stage, and the long-term future of the Sunday show is very much in doubt. WWF. The Mountie is officially gone since Rick Martel will be replacing him for the title matches with Bret Hart at the California shows this coming weekend, although that hasn't been announced on television, so unless he's just going to work the final pay-per-view date, I'll assume that means Mountie versus British Bulldog is off Survivor Series as well. Want to know how Cmll got his name? Back about 10 years ago, Jim Harris came into the Memphis territory and Jerry Lawler had an idea to make him an African savage. They saw the name of a Dr. Cmll in a National Geographic who was researching in Uganda, did a video of him stalking around Jarrett's backyard, and the rest is history. Sensational Sherry won't be in Shawn Michaels' corner at the pay-per-view, but they'll probably do something on the show to further her turn. The Tatunka vs. Blake Beverly match on November 7th in Orlando had an unplanned finish as the top rope snapped and Beverly took a nasty fall to the floor and couldn't get up, thus he lost via count out. The new WWF magazine, Michael's cover, in a story on Randy Savage, acknowledges his divorce of Elizabeth. Roy London, who formerly worked for Pro Wrestling Illustrated as a photographer, was the first to leave that staff in the wake of the sale and will join Titan as a staff photographer. TV ratings saw All-American on November 1st do a 2.1 rating, while Primetime on November 2nd did a 1.8. Titan is planning on building a 45,000 square foot warehouse in Trumbull, Connecticut to house a mail order facility to handle merchandise. A record called Slam, sung by several WWF wrestlers, will be released in England on November 30th and is considered to have a good shot at being the Christmas #1 pop song in the country. The readers' pages. Eric Revard of 7310 Duce, Greenwood, Michigan 48006 is looking for a tape of the Michael Jackson concert on HBO. Smoky Mountain Wrestling at P.O. Box 1279, Morristown, Tennessee 37816 has just released Thanksgiving Thunder 92 shirts. T-shirts are $10 and sweatshirts are $20. Ron Hutchison of P.O. Box 22523, 300 Coxwell Avenue, Toronto, ONTM4L3W7 is looking to get the movie Alley Cats videos of FMW, All Japan Women, Mexico and Smoky Mountain, and can trade and exchange tapes from Old Stampede, Maritimes, Montreal, and Portland. John McAdam of 303-5 Brook Village Road, Nashua, New Hampshire 03062 has tons of videos for trade from the early 80s to the present. Send $2 for a listing. Paris Anderson of care of Kristen Adams, 4043 West Jolly Road No. 14. Lansing, Michigan 48911 is looking for videotapes of Coquina and Semu from Continental, the TNT show with Bruno Sammartino, Tito Santana and Tonga Kid as guests, as well as Tonga Kid or Wild Samoans AWA t-shirts. Any photos of Samoans and the Body Shop segment with Shiva AFI and Moolah. Mark Castle of 57 South Wind Lane, Milford, Connecticut 06460 is looking for pre-WWF videotapes of Mark Calloway and any videos on Medusa. Jeff Osborne of 3420 New Harmony Road, Evansville, Indiana 47720 puts out a newsletter called Watch This Wrestling, and will send a sample copy with a SACE. Wrestling history. Some additional information regarding the origination of the world title. Tom Jenkins and Frank Gotch wrestled for the first time on February 22, 1903 in Cleveland. Jenkins was defending his American Catch as Catch Can Wrestling Championship, a title he had won in 1897 from Farmer Burns. Jenkins won both falls, although Gotch impressed with his skills. A rematch took place January 27, 1904 in Bellingham, Washington. Gotch won the title in straight falls, winning the second by disqualification when a frustrated Jenkins punched him. The two met again on February 2, 1905 in Cleveland, with Gotch winning the second and third falls. Jenkins was heavily criticized in the press as he appeared to run out of gas in the second fall. A fourth match was held March 15, 1905 in Madison Square Garden. The newspaper reports made much of Gotch's brilliant wrestling in winning the second fall. However, Jenkins won the first and third falls and regained the title. This set up Jenkins versus George Hawkins on May 4, 1905 in Madison Square Garden to crown the first World Catch as Catch Can champion. Jenkins was billed as American champion, while Hawkins was billed as World Greco-Roman champion, a title he was billed as holding in Europe since 1901. Hawkins totally dominated Jenkins, winning straight falls in 31-15 and 22-04. Hawkins, not Gotch, was the first seriously recognized world champion in the United States. Gotch promptly challenged Hawkins for the title, but Hawkins had commitments in Australia and left the United States before a match could be made. Jenkins and Gotch met again on May 19, 1905 in Madison Square Garden. From the newspaper reports, this was probably the greatest big match of that era. The two reportedly beat each other senseless over the course of 2+ hours. Jenkins won the first and third fall to keep the title, and Gotch was carried from the arena and was bedridden for several days after the match. The two met for a sixth time on May 23, 1906 in Kansas City. Jenkins won the first fall, with Gotch coming back to win the final two falls and take the title for the second time. They met at least two more times, once with Jenkins coming out of retirement to challenge for the world title that Gotch eventually won from Hawkins. Gotch's second reign as American champion ended when he lost in strange fashion to Fred Beal in New Orleans on December 1, 1906. After winning the first fall, Gotch took a bad bump on his head on the arena floor. When he was rolled back in the ring, Beal pinned him to win the second fall. Gotch didn't recover between falls and Beal finished him off in 30 seconds to win the title. The rematch took place December 17, 1906 in Kansas City, with Gotch dominating en route to gaining the American title for the third time, winning in 2 straight falls. The Gotch-Beal series smacks of being a work title change program. In fact, Beal became one of Gotch's regular touring opponents over the next few years, and they had many rematches all over the country. The long-awaited Gotch-Hawkins match for Hawkins' world title took place April 3, 1908 at the Dexter Park Pavilion in Chicago. Gotch won the world title when Hawkins quit after 2 hours, 3 minutes, most of which was comprised of Gotch refusing to lock up and continually fouling Hawkins. Reports indicate the ref turned a blind eye to Gotch's tactics. They had a dubious rematch on September 4, 1911, which Gotch won. Gotch never lost the world title but eased into semi-retirement after the second Hawkins match, winning his final match on July 2, 1915 against Henry Orderman. I'm surprised there is so much confusion abounding regarding the origin of the world title in this country. The major events occurring in the early part of the century, particularly Jenkins Hawkins and Gotch Hawkins matches, are easy to research at a major library via the New York Times yearly indexes and microfilm copies of that newspaper. Unfortunately, nobody writing about wrestling seems to care to research. It's sad to see that history has forgotten Jenkins and Hawkins as they were eclipsed by the legend of Gotch. Jenkins was no less than equal to Gotch in mat skill, although far behind in charisma. It's strange that a man who twice beat Gotch in title matches in Madison Square Garden would be so anonymous to historians. More people today know of Beal's one win that was probably worked over Gotch than Jenkins' 3 wins. As for Hockenschmidt, I think anyone who studied wrestling during that period in any depth would come to the conclusion that in a square shooting match, he was the best. His matches against Gotch were the worst screw jobs of the era. John Williams, Pasadena, California. Response from Meltzer: the controversy over the 1911 Gotch-Hockenschmidt match was that just before the match, Gotch's people allegedly paid one of Hockenschmidt's training partners $5,000, which was an incredible amount of money in those days, to accidentally tear up his knee, which he did. Hockenschmidt wanted to cancel the match, but the promoters, who had an incredible advance, the match destroyed all crowd and gate records up to that point, drawing about 30,000 fans, told Hockenschmidt that Gotch had suffered an even more serious neck injury but was willing to go on with the match because of the big payoff he'd be getting. When Hockenschmidt got in the ring, he found out he'd been worked and Gotch was in perfect condition, and Gotch capitalized on Hack's injury and beat him handily. Both Gotch and Hack received payoffs reportedly in excess of $20,000, which was enough to retire on in those days, and Gotch did only a few more serious matches afterward before retiring. You're very mistaken about Bronco Nagurski's wrestling ability. It is true that he was one of the greatest football players of all time and was also a good box office draw in pro wrestling, but the fact is that he was also an excellent pro wrestler. He was trained by Ray Steele, George Sauer, Steele's brother, who was a top trainer for the U.S. Navy, Tony and Joe Stecker and Jack Sampson. You may not be familiar with Sampson, but at one point he defeated Stanislaw Zabishko in a shoot in Philadelphia. The truth was that Bronco chewed people up in the ring, often hitting them so hard that men such as Abe Cashy almost had their careers ended legit after getting hit with a Nagurski shoulder block. It was good to see someone write the accurate story on Gotch, etc., and point out that the NWA wasn't formed until 1948. The NWA was formed in October 1948. The first meeting was at the Dittman Hotel in Minneapolis. The original members were President Pinky George of Des Moines, Vice President Al Haft of Columbus, Ohio, and Secretary-Treasurer Sam Mushnick of St. Louis. The other original promoters were Tony Stecker and Wally Carbo of Minneapolis, Harry Light of Detroit, George Simpson of Kansas City, and Fred Kohler of Chicago. These were some of the long-established and leading offices during that time period. They didn't band together because they were smaller or had competition from the big-name talent. Mushnick held his own in St. Louis because Al Haft and Frankie Taliber from Ohio and Stecker and Carbo in Minneapolis provided him with top-notch talent. When Kohler got on the Dumont Network, the NWA had its wrestlers on television weekly in 38 states. There is also more to the story than just Lou Thez and Orville Brown. The NWA originally brought together all the major claimants of the time for a series of elimination title matches, including Cliff Gustafson, Frank Sexton, and Ruffy Silverstein. Throw in other top-notchers of the day like Buddy Rogers, Don Eagle, Nagurski, Bill Lungson, Shandor Sabo, Steve Casey, Dr. Len Hall, George Gordienko, Butch Levy, and Joe Pass Sondak, and one could see that they actually controlled the top boys of the year and systematically established the title. I agree with everything else that you wrote. Mushnick was not only a great promoter, but also a good statesman who led the NWA during its heyday. Thez could hold up his hands with the best of them, so nobody tried any double-cross finishes on him while he held the title. Credit should also be given to such men as Vern Gagne, Dick Hutton, Pat O'Connor, Ray Gunkel, Bill Miller, Bob Geigel, and Joe Scarpello. The NWA grew in stature because they had wrestlers who truly could hook any rival promoter's champion. Gus Sonnenberg and Jim Londos were among the first truly charismatic people in pro wrestling. The time and style was very much different from today. Even the heels could really wrestle. Jim Melby, St. Paul, Minnesota. Response from Meltzer: since I obviously never saw Nagurski wrestle, I can only go by what those who wrestled against him have told me, and it was a pretty consistent viewpoint that he was a football legend put over for that reason and was unskilled as a wrestler. Nagurski has a legit football legend for toughness and power, so there is no doubt he could have knocked guys silly with a shoot shoulder block. But knocking guys silly isn't working nor skillful wrestling. In the October 19th letters section you mentioned about the secret NWA title switch between Ric Flair and Harley Race in New Zealand. I'm told a similar situation occurred between Bob Backlund and Antonio Inoki when Backlund was WWF champ. Is that true? Scott Wallace, Billerica, Massachusetts. Response from Meltzer: I believe it took place in December of 1979 when Inoki pinned Backlund to win the WWF title in Japan. I don't know the politics behind this, but it appears it may have been a setup on Backlund. They had a rematch 1 week later which ended with a no contest, but Backlund was given back the belt. I was always under the impression that Inoki pulled this angle without the knowledge of Vince McMahon Sr. because TV Asahi was scheduled to tape the January 1980 Madison Square Garden show and Inoki wanted to wrestle Backlund in the main event to show fans in Japan that he was a worldwide legend. The compromise was reached in that Inoki was acknowledged on the show against Iron Sheik, I believe, as World Martial Arts Champion, while Backlund wrestled Bobby Duncombe for what was billed in Japan as the held-up WWF title, although in the US Backlund was billed as champion all along. For those who have a tape of that show, you'll notice in the ring introductions by Howard Finkel, Backlund didn't come to the ring with the belt and wasn't billed as champion. Inoki pinning Backlund was never acknowledged in the United States or in the WWF history lineage.